Please stand. Almighty God, we pray for your blessing upon this council. Help and prosper its work for the advancement and benefit of its people, so that peace and happiness, unity and justice may be established amongst us all. Amen.
Amen.
Please be seated. Manningham City Council acknowledges the Wurundjeri people as the traditional custodians of the land we now know as Manningham. We pay our respects to Wurundjeri elders past and present and value the ongoing contribution to the cultural heritage of Manningham. Manningham Council would also like to acknowledge the contribution made to Manningham over the years by people of diverse backgrounds and cultures. I'd like to welcome members of the public who have joined us in person and online to observe tonight's proceedings. I'd also like to especially acknowledge our former Mayor and Councillor Ron Kitchingman. I would also like to advise all the public that tonight's meeting is being audio and video recorded. All care will be taken to maintain your privacy. However, as a visitor in the public gallery, your presence may be recorded. By remaining in the gallery, it's assumed that you have given your consent in the event that your voice and or image is broadcast by council. As with all council meetings, we are still taking questions from the public and encourage you to submit your questions in accordance with our normal practice. As we transition back to our in-person meetings, we'll continue to take questions from members of the public who do not feel comfortable attending the meeting in person, and in these circumstances, our CEO will read out your question. A response will be provided where we have the information to hand. If we're unable to provide a meaningful response, we'll take your question on notice and provide a response in writing. We'll deal with a maximum of 2 questions per person and 2 questions on any one issue. If you have more than 2 questions, please submit these additional questions in writing through the normal channels. Council meetings are governed by Manningham's governance rules. I will introduce each item as listed on the agenda, calling it by number and by reading the title. I will then call for a mover and a seconder of a motion on the item before opening any debate. Only councillors are able to join the debate on an item. Councillors may adopt the officer's recommendation in the report or propose amendments and supplementary motions. Item 2, apologies and requests for leave of absence. There are no apologies. Item 3, prior notification of conflict of interest. No prior notifications of conflicts of interest have been received, councillors. Would anyone like to give notice of a conflict of interest now? Thank you. That is a no. Item 4, confirmation of minutes. Do I have a mover? Councillor Lang.
I move that the minutes of the council meetings held on the 23rd of March 2021 and the 20th of April 2021 be confirmed.
Thank you. And do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Chen, I'll put that motion. Those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Item 5, presentations. Item 5.1, passing of Mr. Robert Pitts. Councillors, it is with deep sadness that I must inform you of the recent passing of former councillor Mr. Robert Pitts. Mr. Pitts was a councillor of the City of Doncaster and Templestowe from 1980 to 1984. Councillors, I'd like to move a motion that council place on record its sadness at the recent passing of Mr. Robert Pitts, record its appreciation for the contribution by Mr. Pitts to the Manningham community, and to extend its sympathy and condolences to Mr. Pitts' family and at this very difficult time. Could I have a seconder for that motion? Thank you. I'll put that motion. Those in favour? Thank you, councillors. Item 6. Petitions. There are no petitions. Item 7, public question time. I understand we've received a question for tonight's meeting from Ms. Helen Josevich, OAM. Ms. Jezovic, if you could come to the microphone, that'd be great.
Thank you, Mayor. Angelo Carabas advised at the council meeting last week in answer to my questions regarding isolation, connectiveness and the use of a community bus that in fact council had 3 community buses and they were given for the use in a needs basis. Angelo advised that the Greek community had been using the community bus for a long time. It was historic. Historically, the Women's Friendship Group was incorporated in 2006, 15 years ago. My first question, would you kindly explain how council assesses a needs basis when allowing the use of a community bus? Also explaining what does council mean by a long time, historic, use, and how does a senior group qualify for the use of the bus?
Thank you. George, would you like an answer for that first question?
All right.
Yeah. So if I could ask Lee Robson, Acting Director of City Planning and Community, to please respond.
Thank you, Mrs. Jurcevic, for your question. Council's community buses provide services for a range of purposes. We have quite a number of buses, and I will explain what is meant by needs basis. We have 2 small people movers that are dedicated to transporting elderly clients to social support activities 5 days per week. These clients have compromised needs, including mobility and social connectedness issues. And they've been referred for this service through the assessment process conducted on behalf of the Commonwealth as part of the My Aged Care assessment portal, operated by us on behalf of the federal government. It is a funded service. These have limited vehicle capacity and there's no scope for additional usage at this stage. When Mr Karambas referred last week to a needs basis, he was referring to the fact that all clients for this type of assessment of transport are independently assessed through the Regional Assessment Service as requiring assistance. Secondly, we have 1 small bus that is used for programs conducted directly by council for clients who require support to attend these activities, and again they've been assessed through the Regional Assessment Service. This vehicle is used 5 days per week and there's no additional capacity. We do have 1 10-seater bus and a 7-seater people mover that operate a couple of days per week to transport elderly clients to shopping centres. This helps them maintain independent living. It also provides transport 1 day per week for some Greek seniors to go to the Ajani Centre. We have a 20-seater bus that is available for hire by others on selected other days of the week and weekends, noting that a driver must have a rigid transport licence to be able to drive it. In pre-COVID times, it was used on a Friday to transport some Italian senior citizens to their activities. These last 2 arrangements of the Italian and Greek seniors are historical. They go back many years. We are aware that there are other senior groups in the community who require transport, particularly other culturally specific senior groups, as well as what the Women's Friendship Group have requested. We note that a report will come to Council mid-year, which will identify some options for a more equitable spread of these precious resources across the community. And once that report has been presented to Council, we'll be in a position to be able to advise about how those resources will be dispersed.
Thank you, Lee. Ms Jurcevic, you may want to continue with your second question, or does that...
It partly answers it, but if I may put it forward, thank you. Why has 1 ethnic, well in fact we've just been advised that 2 ethnic cultures have given the opportunity to use the community bus for a long time, when the Women's Friendship Group has representatives of 40 ethnic cultures within its membership and has not been successful in having the use of a community bus, even though requested, over the last 7 years?
Thanks again, Helen. And I'm sorry, I jumped in ahead.
I'll ask Lee Robson, Acting Director for City Planning and Community, to respond.
Thank you for that question. And like many things, the way that the limited resources of community transport is allocated has evolved over many years. As mentioned in my previous response, the current practice has been in place for up to 20 years. It's well overdue for a review, and that's indeed what we are doing. As mentioned in last week's response to your question, officers are working on an analysis of how best to meet the needs of all older residents who require transport to seniors groups and shopping trips and other purposes as well. This analysis will consider the issues raised in this question, and Council will be able to consider options for what they would like to prioritise and what additional costs would be associated with each option when this briefing comes to Council in a couple of weeks.
Thank you very much. Lee Robson, I have a question from Councillor Goff.
No, Mr Mayor, I don't know whether it's protocol or not here, but whether I could actually shed light on the second question as to why.
Look,
That's all right.
I'm confident I'm confident that.
That's all right. I can
thank
actually shed that light. If you want to wait, I'll afterwards. I'll let them know.
I'll ask for that. If you could make contact with Helen afterwards, that'd be fine. But thank you, Helen. I can assure you that those reports that have been promised will be considered by Council in due course, and I appreciate your advocacy on your group's behalf.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We do have some other questions from Simon. I should know it by now. Simon Conisby. If you'd like to come to the microphone.
Thank you, Mr Mayor and Council. As the Council will be fully aware, there has been an extensive consultation process for the Bulleen Precinct Land Use Framework Plan run by the State Government. The Advisory Committee has now submitted their report. So my two questions are, question number one, does the Council know whether the Minister for Planning, that's the State Minister, will release a public response, particularly for the Planning Scheme Amendment C125 Manningham, which is mainly around the Yarra Valley Country Club? And question two, does the Council know again whether the Minister for Planning will release a public response for the broader Bulleen precinct? Thank you.
Thank you, Simon, for your questions. I'll ask the CEO to respond.
Thanks for the question. In terms of dates, we're not sure in terms of when that will be, but ordinarily there would be some kind of response back to panel findings from the Minister.
Yes.
And normally that would be public. So it's my understanding, unless Mr McMaster wants to correct me.
Usually the report isn't public, but the minister's response.
The Minister's response, that's right. And so as soon as that becomes available, what we'll do is we'll make sure that we're in contact with, obviously, our community to make sure that they're well aware of that. We'll certainly make the Council aware of it as well through the Chamber. So, yeah, ordinarily that is the case, and it's available to community and to Council.
What mechanism will you be able to release that once you get it, so the public can see it?
Yeah, so as I said, we'll certainly make sure the councillors are publicly aware of it. So through council processes, and certainly ensure that it's up on council's website as well.
Right, thank you.
Certainly a link to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. That was no further questions. Item 8, admission of urgent business. Is there any urgent business? Councillor Lightbody?
I'd like to move that Council admits for consideration the following urgent business item to this Council meeting agenda. Item 14.1, International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia and Biphobia. Ida Hobbit Day, in brackets.
Thank you, Councillor Lightbody. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Laura Main. As it's a procedural thing, I'll put that vote. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. So that'll be considered later on in the meeting for the members of the public. Item 9, Planning permit applications. There are no planning permit applications, and we'll move on to item 10, city planning and community. 10.1, planning policy framework, policy neutral translation of the Manningham planning scheme. Do I have a mover? Councillor.
Mr Mayor, I'd like to move the following recommendation, but also introducing another part. So I'm actually wanting Part C to be called Part D and insert a new Part C, which is authorising the Director of City Planning and Community, yes, I couldn't read my own writing, to make minor factual and wording adjustments.
Prior to submission?
Prior to submission, yes, prior to submission. There are a number of they're very minor. It changes no content of what is in this.
Thank you. I'll just clarify that the officers have the correct wording of that, and I'll ask them to read that back so that we're all clear. Is that okay, Carrie?
Sure. The council authorised the Director of City Planning and Community to make minor factual and wording adjustments prior to submission to the Minister.
And that would be item C, and then current item C becomes D. Thank you. That's what you asked for, Councillor Goff.
Thank you.
Do I have a seconder for that?
Yes.
Councillor Diamante. Councillor Goff, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And this particular process has come up to us because throughout the state of Victoria we are undertaking a new way in which planning applications are going to be written and presented to people, and we need to do our work in order to get all of that correct in there. And by the way, this will be coming up again very soon because we're going to be reviewing our planning scheme, but we'll be renewing it in the new format. I think it goes back to 2018 where the government made some changes to the planning scheme, and then more in the way it was going to be presented and how it's going. But this is the final way in which we're going to be looking at planning schemes, and what it's going to do, the aim of it is to bring every planning scheme policy of every council into the same way it's set out, the same profile, the same terminology, and how the framework of how it's all set out. So it doesn't matter what council anyone goes to, they're easily going to be able to read, find out about it, and know where to look for the specific things, and the actual zones and things will all be there and presented. So basically this is introducing new ways in which we're taking statewide, and that's basically the Victorian planning provisions that are going statewide, and they're also inserting an area that hasn't been there, a regional. So it may be Eastern Melbourne in a regional context, and things that we're looking for in planning schemes to develop or to make avail themselves there, and then the local, which is actually Manningham. And in doing this, it's now set up under a number of different themes. I think there are about 9 of them, and they are the themes that you go and read through and find out about that town and about the city. Now, it basically is putting together what we've got, which is our local planning policy framework, which we've got at the moment, and we've also got municipal planning strategy. And they've been 2 separate documents, need to be read together, but this new document, which is the planning policy framework we're having for Manningham, is going to be incorporating both of those documents. So a lot of the work, and it is a great deal of work, in getting all of those particular issues and all of the little provisions in each part of the planning scheme that we've had translated into the new format. And I'm sure that has taken a lot of work, and thank the planning department and all of the people that have been working in that department to actually get a neutral translation. And a neutral translation is very, very important. The neutral translation is important because we have not gone to the community to talk about our municipal strategic and planning provisions that we've got here. And in a process of reviewing them, we would need to go to the community. So we have not done so, and this is a translation for the Minister of what is currently in operation here. So that is extremely important to actually put into there. It actually strengthens and makes more common the state planning provisions and everything else that are in there, and it's giving weight to all of the things in there, so people don't just read out of context just Manningham. You'll be reading what is applying to your piece of land or your area in its entirety, and there won't be any surprises for people coming in there. So indeed, we've done a lot of work. There's just a couple of words that need to be changed a little bit, but it doesn't change anything in the body of what is talked about in this document, and therefore that's why I've put the little C in and created a D. Okay.
Thank you very much, Councillor Goff, for the comprehensive history and informative way you put that. Thank you. Councillor Diamante, would you like to speak to the motion?
Just briefly, thank you, Mr Mayor. I just want to reassure the public, building on what Councillor Goff said, that the councillors and the council officers have gone through these translations in a lot of detail, and we've done so to ensure that the conditions within the planning scheme and the Manningham planning scheme that many of our community rely on continue to exist, including heritage matters, considerations, setbacks, height restrictions, etc. So I think it's, as Councillor Goff said, it hasn't gone to consultation, but I think it's important to understand that all of the conditions continue to exist.
Thank you, Councillor Diamante. Is there anyone who'd like to speak against the motion? Anyone else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Lang?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I also would like to speak on what Councillor Goff said and add to what Councillor Diamante said as well, is that the review process and the reworking is about the format and it is not about losing the content, and that there is also in that there are still planning controls and policies so that we don't lose the protection or the preservation of our vital green wedge land, which is the lungs of Manningham, of Melbourne, which Manningham are privileged to house. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Laura May?
Yeah, just really briefly want to acknowledge the hard work of the officers. They made one of the documents down from 37,000 words to 5,000 words and the other from 24,000 words to 10,000 words. Just emphasise that hopefully this can make understanding policy a little less confusing and easy to understand, hopefully making procedure move more quickly and removing barriers for allowing all members of the public to understand our planning scheme. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Laura May. Councillor Chen?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I just want to reiterate that the translation is a government's initiative, and the no new policy directions have been included, and many just the neutral translation. And I have requested clarification about the status of the mandatory policy, part of the current planning scheme under the new translation. And I'm pleased to know that the officers have checked the mandatory part of the current planning scheme and are comfortable that no mandatory policy that was contained in the current MSS, that is Municipal Strategic Statement, as part of the translation has been lost. So we have to be very clear about the mandatory part of the planning scheme. So in the meantime, officers are currently commencing a statutory review of our Manningham planning scheme to identify major planning issues that are affecting the municipality. So I will encourage our community, when the time comes, give your input and just provide your feedback. And there will be the community and stakeholder consultation, I think, later of the year. So I encourage everyone in our community to participate. And this is your time to give feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chen. Are there any other speakers for or against the motion? There being no other speakers, I'll put that motion. Those in favour? And carried unanimously. Again, thank you, councillors. Item 10.2, community consultation results. Tunstall Square Kindergarten proposed expansion into St Clem's Reserve. Do I have a mover? Councillor Lightbody.
I'd like to move that the recommendation be adopted.
Thank you. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Lang. Councillor Lightbody, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yep. The new concept for the proposed expansion of the Tunstall Square Kindergarten allows for the expansion of the kinder, for it to be able to provide 3-year-old kinder services to our local community, while also improving the public open space at St Clem's Reserve. The concept allows for the expansion of the kinder within its current footprint, and more play space will be opened up in the underutilised garden space in front of the existing maternal and child health centre to reduce the loss of space from the incorporation of the additional rooms. As with all kinder expansions, the kinder will need to apply for state government grant funding to achieve this expansion. The plan also supports the creation of a new, safe, attractive entrance to St Clem's Reserve from the Russell Crescent through changes to underutilised car parking space. This will improve access from the western side of the park while improving the overall amenity as well.
Thank you, Councillor Lightbody. Councillor Lang, would you like to speak to the motion?
Only a few to add, because Councillor Lightbody did a very good job in clarifying all the points. But it was through the community engagement process that it came clear that the St Clem's Reserve open space was highly valued by the community. And I'd just like to commend our officers for coming up with concept drawings that really did open up that space, the entrance to that space, to make it not only keep it, but actually make it a more usable space. And the consolidation of the play space inside the kinder also allows for greater supervision too, and that the officers will continue to work with the kinder committee on this project.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. Would anyone like to speak against the motion? Would anyone else like to speak for the motion or to the motion? Councillor Stephen Mayne.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I agree with everyone else about the quality of the design, and I just wish the committee the best of luck in getting funding. It is an interesting situation where you've got council-owned assets, but we really leave them alone to these volunteer committees, which often turn over quite rapidly, kinder committees. And then you've got combinations of state and sometimes federal funding. So it is a real bit of a hodgepodge of a funding model. And I'm sort of not absolutely convinced about how it's going to play out in terms of we own the infrastructure and whether we can sort of sit back for the next decade and allow others to fund and develop. We own close to, I think, 25 kinders. I think one of them is co-located with a school at Templestowe Valley. I think the better model would be kinders like co-located with schools and even probably incorporated into the program, rather than being little islands, often in back streets or adjacent to our parks. So I hope that it's unusual to get a council building that may well be renovated, improved, expanded with 100% external funding, which seems to be what is being contemplated here. If that funding is available, that's great. I hope they get it. But there is going to be increased demand, both from population growth and from increased hours. And so at some point, I suspect council might have to step up with some funding, potentially. But obviously, in this instance, it's other levels of government who've introduced the policy, which has created the need for the extra space, and there apparently is funding to deliver some of the extra space. So I wish the committee best of luck, and I think council's added a lot of value so far through this process, and hope we can continue to actually see this development happen, because there's clearly merit and demand for what is being proposed.
Thank you, Councillor Stephen Mayne. Any other speakers? I'll put that motion. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. Again, thank you, councillors. Item 10.3, proposed exhibition of Manningham draft art collection policy and draft public art policy. Do I have a mover? Councillor Laura Mayne.
I'd like to move that the recommendation be adopted.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Kleinert. Councillor Laura May, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just briefly, this motion explores two policies, the draft Manningham Art Collection Policy and the draft Manningham Public Art Policy. These are both based on the advice of the Arts Advisory Committee and accompanied with detailed guidelines and robust framework, which are in accordance with the industry best practice. Both policies explore and confirm Council's position for the collection management and the investment in temporary and permanent public art. Something noteworthy is that the draft public art policy includes an objective whereby community infrastructure projects with a budget of excess of $2 million would include 1% of total project value allocated to public art. This is a great initiative and is something also followed by many other local councils in their art policies. I just like to say that it's important for council to consider the arts and public art, and it gives our community a unique identity, a sense of pride, and enriches us culturally. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Main. Councillor Kleinert. Would anyone else like to speak against the motion? Would anyone like to speak to the motion? Councillor Lee.
I don't have very much to add at all, but I just really do look forward to the exhibition process on our arts and culture policy, because I know that the arts and culture is very valued and important to Manningham, and I look forward to the community having an opportunity to view the arts and culture policies and to put that public lens on the art and culture that they would like in their community. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? I will put that motion. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Item 10.4, endorsement of library local laws. Do I have a mover? Councillor Kleinert.
That the recommendation be adopted.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Stephen May. Councillor Kleinert.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is pretty straightforward. It's the Whitehorse Manningham Regional Library operates under the Local Government Act of 1989. It basically means under that any slight changes need to go through a process. So this is basically some terminology and legislative requirements that have been updated due to the Local Government Act of 2020. So they are all very minor, but in that there is a process that has to go out to public consultation, and there were no submissions, and we're now bringing this through to our council before it then goes to the corporation, of which myself and Councillor Stephen Main sit on. Just to be noted that we're in a regional library with Whitehorse, that's the Whitehorse Manningham, covers 9 libraries. Council's contribution here is 40% to that. Whitehorse's is 60%, and that's due to the fact that they've got more councils, and again, it's a bit historic. It's nothing really, this is just really has to happen. There's some minor tweaks, which basically about meeting procedures and the use of the common seal. So nothing at all alarming. So very simple process. Let's pass it, and so it can get to the next meeting of the Library Board coming up next month.
Thank you, Councillor Kleinert. Councillor Stephen May. Anyone like to speak against the motion? Any other speakers for the motion? I'll put that motion. Those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Item 11, city services. There are no city services reports. Item 12, shared services. There are also no shared services report. Item 13, Chief Executive Officer. 13.1, Council's response to community panel outcomes. Councillors, I'd like to move that the recommendation be adopted. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Lang. And with that, I will speak to the motion. So it's worth noting that we have some panel members with us tonight. Thank you for coming. It's a long process and you keep turning up, so that's great. And for those who are online, hopefully watching, obviously this is a historical process that we've gone through, as I said last week, and councillors, I think it's been a successful one. and this is the culmination of that success is what we're considering tonight. So what I'd like to do for the public's sake is to go through the, I'll get my Roman numerals right, the 12 recommendations that the panel have made, and note the slight changes that have been proposed in the report, so that the panel members are aware of what we are talking about, and also that the public are aware of the hard work that the panel has put in. So, item 1, plan for new developments responsibly to maintain principles of protecting our environment, green and open space, environmentally sustainable through the use of materials and maintaining a balance of city and country. So that was, the report supports this in full. But also item 2, which is consider the core principles of diversity and protecting wildlife in all that we do. And again, that is fully supported in the report. Item 3, the report recommends some minor changes to this, and I'll read out the revised version. Provide ways for people to connect. Connections between and with young and older people in the physical built environment and online, deliver events, festivals, markets and activities, and provide infrastructure, paths, trails, street furniture and accessible transport options. So there was a slight amendment just clarifying what intra-generational meant. Item 4, plan for equitable and accessible services and infrastructure for prominent issues such as mental health and social isolation. Council consider the specific identified needs of all our community. And at this point, the report recommends that we remove the specifics of what that meant, so that we don't exclude people. I appreciate the extra emphasis in terms of young people, older people, culturally and linguistically, got it, diverse people with a disability. People with a disability and those not engaged in the community. And then, that was the slight modification, and decision-making on evidence-based data on population growth, trends and community input. So item 5, celebrate and promote our arts and culture to support a healthy community and local economy. Item 6, expand or better utilise our current facilities, our stadiums or spaces, e.g. reserves, or develop new facilities. These facilities to become community hubs with activities and events for all. Again, in full support. Item 7, partner support, develop relationships with library, community groups, neighbourhood houses, volunteering groups to deliver on outcomes. Item, again, fully supported. Item 8, educational and awareness programs, workshops, classes, environment, mental health, family violence for our cold community, skill sharing. And then close brackets, to support a connected and healthy community and waste management, compost, climate change and biodiversity. Again, fully supported. Item 9, communications, marketing, advertising to support awareness of initiatives, services and activities, programs, particularly local, to connect our community and on the environment. Again, fully supported. Item 10, advocate to government and business on environmental issues, and again, fully supported. Item 11, with a slight modification to add the word particularly. So to support local businesses, particularly where they demonstrate alignment with our community values, provide services to the community, or are partnering with local community organisations and services. And then item 12, council to measure and demonstrate success of its services and achievement of social, environmental and economic outcomes against community need. Set targets and report back on progress. And the report recommends deleting environmental because it should be reporting back on all progress, not just environmental progress. And then obviously there was the community vision, which we read through last week, so I won't go over that again, but there might be some other councillors who want to talk to that. Do I need to give myself an extension? I think I'm going to pull rank.
And I'll second it.
Thank you. I'll put that motion. Thank you. No one's calling me out. Oh, that is passed. Thank you. So again, I'd like to, I think, councillors, this is a great outcome from our community, and it's something that it reinforces a lot of the things that we've already been talking about, but it's definitely added some richness in terms of the things that we've been talking about, and will definitely keep us on track, hopefully, for the next 4 years. So, councillors, I endorse this wholeheartedly, and I really appreciate the work from our officers in facilitating all this, generating a panel, etc., etc. And I appreciate the councillors supporting the notion from the get-go, and the support has been really, really great from everyone here in this room. So with that, I will move to the seconder, Councillor Lang. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think you did a very extensive job of reading out all the outcomes. Look, I just want to compliment and commend our council officers for their professional and well-organised and very prompt response to the new Local Government Act 2020 that states that council must adopt community engagement policy, including a deliberative panel. All councils conducted their deliberative engagements in a variety of formats, but Manningham's deliberate engagement jury panel over the 4 full days sessions was professionally conducted and recognised for its excellence in its operation. So I commend our council officers for that. Our council promise to the community panel is to give weight to and incorporate to the greatest extent possible the community panel outcomes in our strategic plans, and to provide a report back to the community panel on how these outcomes have been addressed in our strategic plans. I want to make thank you to the community panel for their dedication over the long hours, not just the hours that they were sitting there over the 4 days, but speaking to many of them, it was the hours then back home in between those full days where they were reading, where they were discussing, and they were very professionally thinking about what it was that they were going to then do when they were back together. They conducted themselves in a very professional way, respecting each other's opinions and negotiating these agreed outcomes. And we really thank our community panel meetings. We really thank our community panel members for all that hard work that they put in. We support and encourage the endorsement of these outcomes to the greatest extent possible into our strategic plans. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. Councillor Quinat.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it would be appropriate time to once again just share what we've passed tonight, which includes the community vision, which we supported as a council without amendment, and it guides our strategic planning. And I really think it's beautiful, and I think it's really timely to remind those that missed it last week of what is in what we're endorsing tonight. And it was beautifully put together by the group, and it says it all. Manningham is a peaceful, inclusive and safe community. We celebrate life with its diverse culture, wildlife and natural environment. We are resilient and value sustainable and healthy living, a sense of belonging and respect for one another. And I think that just sums up our community so well. It sums up the community panel and their feeling as a group of residents that came together with a desire to contribute to our city, and it's beautiful. And I'm so happy that us as a council collectively have taken it on without amendment. And I feel that that's very much in keeping with our community spirit of all that was encapsulated in these words. So thank you to the officers, thank you to everyone that was part of the panel, and thank you to the fellow councillors in what's been a really great and productive vision for us going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Clyde. Anyone else like to speak? Thank you, Councillor Chen.
Mr. Mayor, the panel of 40 community members are everyday people. They are people just live next door. And words are certainly not enough to express my gratitude. Of course, I believe all my fellow councillors' gratitude to the panel members' hard work. Their entire participation for the whole 20 hours and the affection and commitment to the deliberative process that produced beautiful, aspirational community vision and 12 recommendations that council only managed to amend a few just to align with our community, the whole policy. So I'm sure that Manningham residents see that and they will appreciate the collective efforts put together by councils and the ordinary people like you and me. So together we work for the better good of our whole community. And thank you, of course, officer and everyone involved.
Thank you, Councillor Chen. Anyone else like to speak for or against the motion? Councillor Stephen May.
Yeah, just briefly I'm really pleased the Mayor and Councillor Kleinert have read into the record the detail of the 12 points and the vision. Because I think there would be very few councils, I suspect, across Melbourne who will have so wholeheartedly endorsed what's come up from the community. I think in Darebin they were, having debates about rejecting, large swathes of what was being recommended by their community. So I did hear that there was some scepticism within the group that whether the council would follow them. And here we are standing up in a public meeting, it's on the record forever, that we're formally, with the officer's support, we're making very, very minor amendments to 4 of the 12. And they are very minor. I mean, they're basically broadening some of the directions. But overall, we're really strongly endorsing the vision and the detail. And so we have a mandate now with all of our strategic documents to go through these 12 points and to say, right, where are they? We've voted for this, the community's asked us to do this, show us where it is in the documents. And so the officers, I'm very confident, will really give that process some heft in terms of producing the documents, and then the councillors in that oversight role will be equally vigilant to make sure that we're really pushing very hard to respect the community's requests on this. And I think, frankly, the quality of the requests is terrific. And that's why I think there's such good support for it, because so much of it makes a lot of sense across a broad spectrum of policy areas. So thanks again for the community's work on this. I think it was conducted very efficiently and effectively on a very tight time frame by order of the state. So this was a real standing start situation here, competing with a lot of other councils for resources of consultants and learning what to do. But I think we pulled it off as seamlessly as any council I've heard, and to finish on this note is excellent. So thanks to all concerned.
Thank you, Councillor Stephen May. Would anyone else like to speak for or against the motion? There being no further speakers, I will put that motion, and those in favour? And carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. And thank you again, community panel members, for coming again tonight. So that brings us to item 13.2, informal meetings of councillors. Do I have a mover? Councillor Diamante.
I'd like to move that the recommendation be adopted.
Thank you. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Lightbody. Assuming you don't want to speak to that, Councillor Diamante. I will put that motion. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. Item 13.3, documents for sealing. Do I have a mover? Councillor Chen and a... Sorry.
I move that the recommendation be adopted.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Kleinert. I'll put that motion. Those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Item 14, urgent business. Item 14.1, as previously flagged, International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia and Biphobia, the Ida Hobbit Day. Do I have a mover? Councillor Lightbody?
I'd like to move that Council A fly the rainbow flag outside the Civic Centre on Doncaster Road each year on May 17th, Ida Hobbit Day, International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia and Biphobia, to visibly express the Council's commitment to diversity in support of the LGBTIQA+ community who live, work and visit Manningham, and B, conduct a review of the Council's flag flying protocol, including an analysis of the need for a process where community groups can approach Council to fly their flag.
Thank you, Councillor Lightbody. And do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Laura May. Councillor Lightbody, would you like to speak to the motion?
This motion to fly the rainbow flag on International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia and Transphobia, I put them in the wrong order, each year on May 17th, along with 44 other Victorian councils this year in 2021, sends a strong message of the ongoing support and commitment Manningham has to the support of diversity and equality. For the LGBTI community, visibility is one of the best ways we can support them. Knowing that their community and leaders support them and can have a great effect on their mental health. While not everyone may agree, this is an opportunity for us to show our leadership and commitment to Council's goals of promoting equality and inclusivity. This motion also ensures that we look at the policy and framework that was last looked at in 2008 to ensure that it meets the demands and investigates the possibility of creating a clear process by which Manningham groups can move through when interested in flying a flag.
Thank you, Councillor Lightbody. Councillor Laura May.
I'd just like to add that this is an important day for government to support the LGBT community, as this day specifically focuses on discrimination, that being homophobia, biphobia, interphobia and transphobia. Inclusivity is core to this council and every council, and a focus of inclusivity is being combative towards any type of discriminative behaviour. As a community with a history of this type of discrimination, it's even more important that us as a council show support for this community. Flying the flag on this day is a small but symbolic way for council to show its support. And flying the flag is conduct that, as Councillor Lightbody has already said, that 44 other councils already do. So we don't really want to be falling behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Laura May. Are there any speakers against the motion? No? Councillor Goff? Thank you. Councillor Goff?
I stand up to speak against this particular motion, Mr Mayor. I'd like to say from the outset, it isn't necessarily the content of what it is, but it's the process. And if anyone ever makes an allegation about there will be a writ on their desk in the morning if they say anything other than it is the process. Mr Mayor, I'm embarrassed to have to get up and stand up and speak against this motion. As a group of councillors who've only been together about 5 months, and we all sat around each other singing Kumbaya and saying how we were going to act. And we said that there were going to be no surprises. We said that we'll go through proper processes. We will discuss issues. We said, yes, we will ask the office for feed in to what we're going to put into our motions. There is no officer report on this. It was a surprise. Saturday, I'm sorry, Mr Mayor, too involved with the football and Anzac Day, all right? And yesterday I worked. Tonight I come in, another motion. This isn't the first time. Last week I was in with a motion that was brought up at the last minute. We seem to be not going through the processes that we said as a council we were going to do. And it's becoming habitual. It's not an occasional. It's 3 or 4 times. I think it's at least 3. We've had last-minute motions brought to the table without what I consider proper, due process. And it's very unfortunate because I don't believe that that leads to good governance. It leads to people say, oh, well, I've got this great idea, we'll put it up, we'll get it through. But not only, Mr Mayor, are we getting it through, we do actually have a policy on flags that can be flown from outside us. And that policy was brought to council when I first got elected and then again, and it was brought up and adjusted because there were major issues in the community and divisiveness in the community. I'm not saying this one's divisive, but there were major issues and we had the policy. And at a whim tonight, every councillor here is going to put up their hand, perhaps, and say, oh, I don't care what our policy is. Our policy is to only fly those, and to have an interpretation of that policy that it's other than that, they actually need to read through that whole motion and how it's worded and the reasons behind it. There were flags that we can fly. The Australian includes all people. The Victorian includes all people. The Manningham includes all people. And then we did, because it became recognised symbols of Australian flags, we flew the Aboriginal flag and the Torres Strait Island flags. And that is directly in our policy. And yet, as a council, that was a really good reason. It's not about whether it's a good reason or not. It's about going through a process. And if this was such an important thing, why didn't it come up when we had the motion about having our Manningham participate in the march? Oh, forgot about that. And just because other councils do, we've got to do it ourselves. Let's not worry about the processes and our policies. Let us make decisions against Manningham's council policy. We are overturning it tonight without discussion, without reason, without seeking why we had that policy, without even questioning it. Hasn't even come up. Oh, that's a great idea. Mr Mayor, I have great concerns about where this council is going. It's looking at how we actually operate. We'll get one.
Would you like more time?
I would like more time, Mr Mayor.
I move.
Councillor Chen,
I'll second it.
I'll put that to the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Now, I think our community really need to be aware that a lot of decisions that are being made here at council are not going through proper process. And I think a lot of our community might be very angry about that. Mr Mayor, I will finish up.
It's okay, sorry.
It's got nothing to do with whatever came up tonight. And last time it wasn't about what came up really. It might have been an element of that one in that one, but it wasn't that the essential thing. It is good governance. And I am putting the warning sign out to all residents of Manningham about good governance because we're ignoring it. And I'm very disappointed that the commitment that was made by all people to work through our processes has just been given a big thumb up or finger up, and we're just going about, I don't know what next month's going to be, or will we have an urgent meeting in a couple of days' time to discuss some other issue that's not been discussed? I'm hearing things like socialising motions. What's that, mentioning it? Oh yeah, I heard it before. Oh, I've been told. This is not how we're supposed to operate, Mr Mayor, and I think I am the first councillor here to draw the line.
Thank you, Councillor Goff. Are there any speakers for the motion now? Councillor Diamante?
Can I nominate an alternate motion?
Yes. If you could, so if the process would be that you outline you don't debate at all, you just say what the alternative motion is, then I'll put that to the mover. If they accept that as an amendment, then which means they control the motion. Otherwise, then we'll debate your amendment.
Okay, thank you. So my alternate motion is where we have the words in A that the council, that we fly the rainbow flag outside the Civic Centre on Doncaster Road each year on 17 May. My alternate motion is that we fly the rainbow flag outside the Civic Centre on Doncaster Road 17th of May 2021. And then the rest of the motion continues. and that there's no change to B.
Mr Mayor,
Councillor Goff?
we haven't undone our flag policy, and the debate on that hasn't occurred. I don't know that wording is in line.
I appreciate that. So, governance, could I just ask for clarification, just in regard to the proposed amendment, which then does not permanently change? It's like a temporary, it's effectively a temporary change of the policy until the policy is reviewed.
Could I?
That's the intent of the.
That's the intent. It's a question of the validity of the amendment, and then you'll have a chance to accept or. So, governance, do you have an opinion on the validity of the amendment? Clarifying, Councillor Goff, that's what you're questioning?
You can move a motion against what we've got that's already an established motion. You will need to I shouldn't tell you how you have to do it. I shouldn't be sitting here doing it.
I'd like to speak in disagreement with Councillor Goff on the policy that exists.
On the procedural part of this?
No, on the actual existing flag policy. Because he's flagging that as the reason why the amendment isn't
I'll
correct.
allow that.
Should we just wait
Yep.
for-
Sorry, what was that from?
Councillor Lightbody has an alternative view on the interpretation of the policies. I'd like to hear.
It is easy. He can do that in his wind-up speech, Mr Mayor, as part of our.
Councillor Goff, yeah, it's not about the. It's about you've questioned the validity of the motion that's been put forward, is my understanding, because it's a policy. Because it doesn't because it doesn't amend the policy. Is that the essence?
Mr Mayor, we are in a situation, we're not talking the substantive way, we're talking a situation where we have a policy that says that these are the flags that we can fly, and that we must fly them. These are the only flags we can fly, and we must fly them between certain times and no others. That is our policy. Now, if we are doing this, we are ignoring our policies without any talk or discussion about anything behind it, and we're putting in something new that was brought in as a last-minute motion 3 days ago, Mr Mayor, and that's all I'm saying.
I appreciate that. My understanding is that what we're moving here is, although it doesn't specify the words of the policy of changing the policy, which I think is where you're getting to, my understanding is it is a valid motion and that we can make a decision on tonight. So, if that's, I'd just like to clarify that with the governance.
That's correct, Mr Mayor. The council can resolve to do anything that's outside of the existing policy framework, provided it's passed by the majority of the council.
Thank you. That was my understanding. Councillor Lightbody, I don't think you need to speak. It's now clarified. It's back to Councillor Diamonte in terms of the wording of that motion of that change. We've captured that, I assume. Councillor Lightbody, are you happy with that? Because I believe it, in essence, achieves the same outcome. So, given that Councillor Lightbody has accepted it, do I have to, sorry, just clarification, this doesn't happen very often, but does Councillor Laura Main need to also accept the amendment as the seconder?
I think it is the mover and seconder.
Yep. Thank you. Councillor Laura Main, you're happy with the amendment proposed by Councillor Diamonte? Yes?
Yes.
Yep. I will now the motion is as put by Councillor Diamonte. Would anyone like to speak?
Who's the mover now?
No, my understanding is that as the
Amendment.
it's an amendment. It's not a new motion, so Councillor Lightbody is still the mover of the motion,
And Councillor
and Councillor Diamonte can speak to the motion.
That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, I am uncomfortable with this agenda item. Not the topic. I voted to support Council's involvement in the Midsummer Pride March, and I'm going to be there. I also voted to support the formation of the dedicated LGBTI committee. I'm uncomfortable, like Councillor Goff said, because we are acting outside our policy. And like Councillor Goff said, I would have liked more time for a policy review, including the criteria for when flags can be flown by community groups. However, I'm very aware that by voting down this motion, we could be misconstrued as not supporting the LGBTI community. Even if we voted down on a process or policy or governance issue, there could be some people that misconstrue that. And I was actually reminded of this when you read the prayer, Mr. Mayor. So, help us prosper and work for the advancement and benefit of the people so that peace and happiness and unity and justice be established amongst all of us. And I thought to myself, despite highly valuing governance, I also highly value peace and happiness and unity. And so by proposing this amendment, I'm hoping that we can continue to maintain happiness and unity and then work on this policy for any future community group that might approach us. And I absolutely support what Councillor Goff says. We need to be united and respect each other and respect policy and governance so that we're not put into these positions in future meetings.
Thank you, Councillor Diamonte. So now, are there any? I think that was a speaker for. Are there any speakers against the current motion?
What is it, Mr. Mayor? What's the current motion?
The current motion, as I understand it, is that fly the rainbow flag outside the Civic Centre on Doncaster Road on the 17th of May 2021, International Day, Ida Hobbit Day, International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia and Biophobia, to visibly express Council's commitment to diversity and in support of the LGBTQIA plus community who live, work and visit in Manningham, that is A, and B, conduct a review of Council's flag flying protocol, including an analysis of the need for a process where community groups can approach Council to fly their flag. That's correct, as I understand it. And so, are there any speakers against the motion?
I'm not sure whether mine's a for or against.
Okay, if you're not sure, you're welcome to speak, because I don't see anyone else jumping up.
Well,
sorry, Councillor Jen, are you definitely against?
well, just like
Would you like to stand, please?
just like my fellow councillor, Councillor Carly Lyon, I'm not sure I should against or for.
I'll give
Because
Carly had the as Councillor Lang had her hand up first. I'll give Carly the option of speaking then. Thank you, Councillor Jen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would also like to state that this is not against the group in which the flag stands for. I am in support for groups being able to have a means by which they can fly their flag. But in this motion coming to us, I was taken back. I just thought we might have a policy for other people to have flags to be flown. And so I was able to research that we at Manningham do not have a means by which other groups can apply to have their flags being flown. And so then that made me concerned that by moving and accepting one, we were then setting a precedence for everybody, or we were actually excluding everybody. And just like Councillor Diamonte said, we actually had in our community vision from our community panel about peace, safety, community, unity and equity. So then I'm concerned. So I'm back to yes, no, yes, which is why I actually added some concern.
Requested the addition.
Yeah. What do I say? Which is why I raised my concerns with the motion, and had point C B.
Sorry, B. Now.
B be put in there, because I believe we should conduct a review of council's flag flying protocols to include an analysis from our community. Do they have the need where community groups would like to approach council to fly the flag? And if we do, then by what process do we follow that to make sure that is fair and equitable to all? Because everybody deserves the same right to do the same as everybody else. And I am not going to be biased towards one. I would like to be able to stand here and say that I am for all of Manningham. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. Are there Councillor Kleinert? I've got. So I think that wasn't really against. That was a sort of an undecided. Councillor Chen was first. I'm going to allow. I'm going to allow Councillor Chen.
Yeah, perhaps because tonight at the moment it is a very difficult decision. And every word we say can have consequences. And that is why I'm extremely uncomfortable and nervous and anxious, and I believe that my fellow councillors feel the same. Because being inclusive, not discriminative, we have to be mindful in this current political situation. But coming from a legal background, I have to give you some statistics. And especially, I heard Councillor Goff said about due process. That comes to the bottom line of my principle. Can't be compromised. And I heard my fellow councillors, Del Montes, she tried to strike a balance, if I could understand you correctly. But even though with all your efforts, I'm still concerned because we have 140 countries, people from 140 countries. And we have numerous sporting clubs and other football, soccer, and other cultural clubs. They all have their flags. And those community groups, they all have their national flags, where they originally coming from. And they are very proud and always wish to fly their flags on that particular day. But because of the process, they have been rejected in the past. And now it was currently suddenly said that how about we fly one day only for this particular occasion? I can't face to those communities into their eyes say that, sorry, you're not doing it today, or perhaps tomorrow, try your luck. Perhaps council pass an urgent motion, you'll get it through because it is a political decision, it is the right thing to do. I can't say that to them. So, and because council is also one of the 3 governments in Australia, so flying a flag on official flag pole in Australia is a symbol of importance and significance, and should follow the right protocol and procedure. If we do not follow the existing policy and procedure, it probably will open us to other people's causes on wanting council to fly their flags. And even for one day only for this year, there will be consequences. Why not we have the process and wait for next year? What is the rush? And that is the question I will ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chen. Councillor Kleinert? You're going to leave it? Councillor Lang, you can ask a question.
Yes.
Sorry, but I've got Councillor Stephen Mayne I'll ask, sorry, I saw Carly, Councillor Lang. Councillor Lang, if you'd like to stand up and ask some questions.
I believe it might be a... Sorry, thank you, Mr Mayor. I believe it might be a governance question, but does our policy state only those flags? It does? Thank you. Second question, Mr Mayor. Which flag... is there a policy by which... Is there a decision or a policy by which to fly another group's flag, one would be removed?
Don't have a policy to fly a flag, so there wouldn't be anything to removed.
Mr Mayor, through you.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Lang, there's nothing in the flag protocol that says that a particular flag will be taken down in the event that a further flag is flown. Outside of the Civic Centre, we have enough flag poles to accommodate the Australian flag, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander flag, the Manningham Council flag, we've already discussed internally, would be the flag that is removed in order to accommodate the flying of the pride flag, if that's what the council would like to accommodate.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. Councillor Lightbody, sorry, I've got Councillor May, and you can ask a question after that, or you can close probably. So I'll, Councillor Stephen May.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Look, I will be supporting the amended motion. I thank Councillor Diamonte for her amendment. I think she's got the tone right. It's a very sensitive issue, this. There's a lot of history in terms of a marginalised community and how political leaders speak about them, treat them. I feel there's a level of atonement that's required, and I'm very nervous about the optics of how we handle this. And I think Councillor Diamonte alluded to that in her comments. So this motion has been wound back considerably from potentially something that was going to happen for a week, something that's going to happen every year, to something that's going to happen for a day. Just one day, a one-off. This is a policy-making body as we stand here tonight. We are able to make policies. It is perfectly legitimate for people to put up motions. That is what happens at councils. All rules have been followed and respected. There's nothing untoward about this. We have an unusual policy which is requiring 14 days notice for motions. So when I was at the City of Melbourne, I think it was 5 days. So you had more time to actually get a motion up. You didn't have to go the urgent route because 14 days is a long time. I think we needed to look at that as a policy. And I just look at the detail of this and I think it's a reasonable companion motion to what we unanimously supported earlier this year, which was that Manningham is officially marching down in Port Phillip for the first time, officially endorsed unanimously at midsummer. To then vote to not fly the flag on the day after that, I think is confusing. It's a little bit contradictory, and I say, is it worth it to make a point about process or to refer back to a historical policy? So policies can
Point
be
of order,
changed.
Mr Mayor.
Is our flag policy a current policy or a historical one?
It's our current policy.
It is our current policy.
It's our current policy.
Thank you,
yeah, that's
Councillor.
right.
Yeah.
But it was last voted on by a different group of councillors. So I guess that's the point I'm making, is that we are allowed, as the current councillors, we are allowed to make policy. That's what we're voted to do. And I think this is a relatively minor, albeit important and symbolic, one-day proposal that I think in the context of everything, in the context of history, in the context of the previous midsummer motion, I think it is important to support it. And I do, again, thank Councillor Diamonte for getting the tone right on this very sensitive issue and for hopefully coming up with a compromise that walks it back to a degree where there can be support from around the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stephen Mayne.
Question, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Goff.
If organisation or somewhere is able to just quickly turn a blind eye or just not want to look at its policy, do you think that's a trustworthy or a good way in which you can openly go about running a council?
I don't think that's an appropriate question. It's my personal view, if you would like that, is that we are here to make policy, and we have been elected to make decisions, and sometimes we have to make decisions
on the run.
On the run. That's a fact of life. Thank you, Councillor Goff. Are there any other questions? I won't. Councillor Lightbody, would you like to close? I'll just remind you, you can only talk about the issues that were raised in terms of the objections, not about anything else. Thank you.
I think I'd like to start off by stating that I disagree with Councillor Goff's reading of the current flags policy, which I have in front of me and I might read out. It says, only the Australian state and Manningham flag shall be flown every weekday, Monday to Friday, and on Australia Day, Anzac Day and the Queen's birthday where they fall on weekends. And the second point, we're not debating whether a flag is going to fly every day. To start with, it's going to be one day. The second point of that also says that the Australian flag, together with the Australian Aboriginal flag and the Torres Strait Islander flag, shall be flown each year for the duration of National Reconciliation Week, NAIDOC Week and Sorry Day. So if we're going by Councillor Goff's reading of the motion...
Reading of the policy.
Reading of the policy. Then the Aboriginal flag and the Torres Strait Islander flag, which are on the flagpoles outside right now, should not be flying, because they shouldn't be flying every day. I think this policy is the minimum and states that the Australian state and Manningham flags can be flown every day, but it doesn't say you can't fly other flags. And the policy is also titled the use of national, state and council flags. We would not be using a national, state or council flag. So I just wanted to put those points out there. We also talked about the process in which this has come about. The process is an urgent business motion which we have for matters that can't be deferred to the next meeting. As the 17th of May is before the next meeting, that is the process that I have taken and followed. Councillor feedback, as Carly and Deirdre have mentioned, has been incorporated into the motion that is now on the table. And I also suspect that few other councils have gone through a whole report and briefing process using all that officer's time to get to a motion content of this such. And as Stephen did point out, we are elected policymakers, and therefore we can occasionally make a policy or put up a policy. I also think in terms of...
sorry, Councillor, your time's up. I don't think I can extend the closing argument.
Sorry.
Thank you. I will therefore put that motion. Those in favour? And against? Thank you, councillors. That is carried. And we move on. Item 15, councillors' question time. Councillors, does anyone wish to raise a question? No questions? Wow, okay. Well, with that, we'll move on to confidential reports. Item 16. There are no confidential reports. Therefore, I will close the meeting and thank you everyone for attending.